So I thought I would start off with what actually I mean about, this is the book, about being feral. And interestingly, the word feral doesn't exist as such in my own native language, which is French. We're not with such a precise kind of meaning. And what I love this word so much, and I'm going to explain, and I kind of challenge our own use of the world on a regular basis. But for me, being feral at that sort of, it is kind of this beautiful, it's a liminal space, being feral. It's like, it's not quite being wild, but it's not quite being civilized. It's like in this in-between space that feels quite contradictory. And often we talk about feral cats or feral children as these things that used to be civilized, we've gone back to this stage where they don't really know what they're doing, and they can't easily, for feral children even speak, or just like. And actually in the book, I really challenge this idea of going back to this kind of negative, regressive, primitive state of just like not having language and actually being quite stupid, because it is dumbing this thing that is so important to our everyday life and language, which is the body. And on the contrary, I'm saying being feral is very much reconnecting to a potential in ourselves that we are regressing and sort of pushing away because of our conditioning and society. So how can we feel more free to be connected to that? And it's an invitation, like I've done earlier, to realize that we are quite constructed in a way we see the world and do things. And then so we don't always always feel we can really listen to that body calling to do certain things or behave in a different way. So how can we trust more that instinct? And for me, being feral is very much about connecting to that spontaneity, but without getting lost in the moment, and sort of actually still connected to awareness and mindfulness. I'm going to read a little extract. Because being feral is consciously opening to that wild side in us we have repressed through conditioning. It is much more than simply being animal. In that sense, it's not an invitation to get loose and wild or get lost in a trance state. It is get lost in a trance state. That was it. Without presence and real awareness of what is happening. Although the state of being feral, through its spontaneity, trust of the unknown, and non-attachment to the ego or thought, does have a quality of being animal. It also requires a conscious act of will and presence. Without choosing to face the constraint of our minds, we cannot release the feral side they repress. You will therefore find in this book that what I mean by feral takes many forms and shapes. It might be being like an animal. It might be being like a plant. Shaping with a landscape. Tuning into nature's rhythm. Moving with your condition. Widening your spatial awareness. And many others. It might always seem obvious to you what it means to be feral in some of my suggestions. This is because I'm intentionally challenging a stereotypical idea, an image of the world which is separated from us and culture. I'm inviting you to leave behind what you think you know, or what is feral, and be open to explore it from a blank canvas. With your moving body. Find out for yourself, with the freshness of a child's curiosity, feral is a place to rediscover what has been forgotten in ourselves and of our deep entanglement with the natural world. It is about reclaiming what is already ours. And my invitation in the books, although it comes from my own experience, my own body, is an invitation to find your own way to connect to that. Not necessarily copying what I'm doing, but more to inspire you to reconnect to your own wildness in your own way. So it's not like the practice are not meant to be copycat. They're more like to open other ways, and maybe you can slightly change your practice to what feels right to you, your own body. It's more like an exploration to rediscover that. Another point I wanted to make is really about, for me, it's important to separate ourselves from this story of separation from nature and the non-human that we have. And there's this beautiful campaign at the moment, I don't know if people have heard about it, that's called We Are Nature. And it's a campaign to change the definition of a dictionary on nature, because the definition of nature excludes humans from it. When you say nature, humans are not meant to be part of it. And I think that's amazing, and in a culture like us, where language is so important, it feels quite meaningful to say we need to change the definition and to include us. And yet, at the same time, what I'm saying in the book is that that's great, but language is also our body, how we move, how we interact with space, that non-verbal communication. So the words are not even enough. It's also the embodiment of what it means to be with nature, in connection, like some of the exercise I made you do. I mean, here, as I say, it's quite an artificial space, but I try to get you to engage more with the space, see where your body wants to go and be. So being more aware of that connection. And I'm going to read another extract from chapter 13, that's called Softening Boundaries. So softening boundaries start with recognizing that we have separated ourselves from non-humans, and that we can change, or we can choose to change the storyline. We can let ourselves be permeated by non-humans, and even recognize that we are already permeated by them. And everything around us, as much as we permeate them. We can choose to become more aware of what I like to call our fuzziness. Not have such defined boundaries and edge. Allowing ourselves to be feral is allowing the story we have of ourselves as human to relax. Of course, we can't really do without boundaries altogether. We can't really do without being an ego. We can't really undo the fact that we see the world from a human perspective. This is part of us. We can, however, recognize that the human lens is not the only way to look at and experience the world. And that when we do, it has limits. What we do is shaped by the idea we have of ourselves. By bringing those limits to attention, by acknowledging humility in how we see the world, we can be more than a self-fulfilling story or those limits. By recognizing that this idea of me, of a human species, is a story that I choose to adapt to, and I can change that. I can make a different choice. I can choose to see beyond that story. I can choose to let my boundaries soften. I can choose to be feral, to open to other non-new way of seeing the world and let them permeate me. I can choose to extend my capacity to be in this world in a less rigid, defined, and egoistical way. Give your ego a rest. Let your boundaries become blurred. Let yourself be confused about where you start and where you end. Relax in the fuzziness and this discomfort. Entry diary. Hackney Marsh, 28th of April 2023. The grass is lush everywhere. It's wet, but I can't resist lying on the ground to start with. I don't want to move for ages, and I don't. I feel heavy, like I'm in a dream that I don't want to wake up from. I open slightly my eyes. I can see the green grass all around me. It already looks quite tall from this angle. It surrounds me like a fortress. I keep closing and opening my eyes slightly. I enjoy nurturing that state in between awakeness and sleepiness. My right hip is swaying, creating waves for my body. It is as if this has nothing to do with me. I'm even surprised my body is moving at all. I enjoy watching the tall grass all around. I enjoy being swayed by my hip. I feel I'm in a dream, in a kind of altered state. I have no desire to come out of it, to wake myself up. I want to move out of here, eventually into the field, but I don't want to commit to full vision. I want to keep it obscured or restricted. I want to keep my mind half asleep so that my body can be in charge. Practice 38. Inner and outer. Move outdoors with your eyes closed. Move from a sense of self and inward journeying. After a while, start opening your eyes for short periods of time. Keep opening and closing them until you get used to full sight. When your eyes are open, gradually invite the outside world to be part of your environment. How do you experience the shift from sense of self to a wider world? How can you keep awareness of both your inner world and the outer world while moving? The last point I wanted to make is about, that is quite big in the book, is the idea of agency, the idea which is our capacity to act in the world, make action, decision, to feel that we can. And what I say in the world is we have quite a strongly minded focused idea. Eventually I want to do this and I'm going there. But somehow we can forget this and then this. What I've learned from moving outdoors for so many years is actually, I get a better sense of agency from just really listening and realizing that me, the whole of me, is not just the idea of me, but actually my body, the environment. So if I really want to take action, I need to take all of that in consideration. So the listening part is quite important, to just somehow listening to part of me that I forget often and giving them voice, and that's more the role of me being part of this world. Now I'd like to finish with another entry diary. I've been moving in Hackney Marsh, as maybe people know it. I know Cat's Riders very well, for 7 years. And I have a collaborator, Dominique, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, that's been filming me for 6 years every month. And I have a very strong connection to the place, and there's a lot I could say about the commitment to one place and just going back, and how much it has taught me about myself and the world. But I thought I'll just read this. I finish on that, so you can feel what moving in this space for so many years, somehow what it has, how Hackney Marshes, 9th of May 2021. It's May, and I'm really excited to come to the marshes. I know the cow parsley will have grown to its full height by now, and that the energy of spring will be felt strongly. I have a warm memory of last year's cow parsley, and every year before that in the spring is bonsai. It's contagious, and it's hard not to feel joyful and active. So it's a real shock to get there and see an empty field instead. The cow parsley and everything else that was growing with it has been mown. I cannot believe it. I feel a sharp pain in my chest, and my anticipated joy and enthusiasm immediately turn into sadness, disappointment, anger. How could they? What did they? What the fuck? I feel a deep sense of loss. I was so looking forward to the cow parsley growing and flowering, being at a hip height, moving with the plants. I had so much pleasure just thinking about it. I can't quite believe it. At the same time, I know I have to keep moving and being, and I can't hold on to this. I can't let myself fall into despair. I have to let myself feel the emotion, though, the sadness and the loss, and somehow not be held hostage by them. Life needs to keep flowing. I'm learning that from the plants. They're not upset they were cut. I am. They're little Buddhas. I'm painfully human. Also, I know their roots are still here. I'm mourning their passing for this year. They will be back. There is a struggle in my movement. At times I bounce, at times collapse. I'm watching the waves of emotion. I know I'm sad, but I can't quite feel it yet. The ebb and flow of my movement is noticeable. I really feel the big waves in contrast to the small ones. At times I need to be still and hardly move. Take the time to look into the distance, reconnect with what's around me. I don't want to lose perspective. I don't want to get lost in my sorrow. I want to be fully awake for this bright blue sky shining above me. Somehow today it's about feeling the pain of loss and the joy of what is there, both at the same time. There is no contradiction in letting them coexist. Somehow I feel all that way. I'm both sadness and joy. I don't need to choose one or the other. In one moment supposing, I have my left hand arm up in front of me. The wrist slightly bends toward me. I turn around with it and onto myself. Then somehow, it feels that my hands go down, and it does in this beautiful rhythm and speed that just feels right, incredibly right. In one of those moments when I'm hardly doing anything and so much is going on, I watch my hand slowly and elegantly fall to the ground. I extend the movement by caressing the grass. In these moments, all the emotions flow in. The sadness, the tears. I work on them with joy. It feels good to feel it. It feels good to share it. It is welcomed by the space, the other plants. I feel that my crying not just for the mowing of a cow parsley, but for the whole attitude of the human race which I belong to, and the way they treat non-humans with so much carelessness. I feel sad to be human. The crying never feels too much or not enough, just right. It feels like a real honoring of my connection to this place and the plants. It is never victim or angry. It is honoring life and its movement. I feel so refreshed and full of energy afterwards. I bounce back full of gratitude for life. Eventually, I stumble upon my little dandelion friend. I come next to it, flirt with it, rolling close. I can't help but picking it up and stick it in my mouth and do bites once more. I come on moving with it. I feel so happy. The juice from the dandelion is nurturing me. I stand up and feel so strong. I don't move so fast, but I feel incredibly solid yet fluid. Strength is flowing through my muscles. I shine standing, affirming my existence. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to bring in my lovely publisher. I thought it was a brilliant idea for me to publish my book. Andrew. Thank you. And if there's anything you'd like to add, it's always welcome.
First of all, I'd like to say I've been to a lot of book launches. And I don't need to finish that sentence. Second, I'd like to say that I have a whole interior cast of people moving and listening and part of what I found in years of movement work is that I'm not a single self, but I'm multiple selves. And I'm interested to notice that my patronising old white man, who is a significant member of the interior cast, who 10 years ago would have said, I would have had to stop him saying, this is ridiculous. Even he is saying, this is something important. This is a new kind of book about a new way of coming to terms with what's happening on the planet, our role in that, what we can do individually and collectively. I've published lots of books about the theory, the economics, and the finance, and the sociology. But this is what we can all do, and it's really important to see it embodied like this, not just read. And then the third thing I'd like to ask is about this question of agency, which you, I don't know, you're going to talk about. I think you did. And in my pen, when we were discussing the movement, one of the things that came up was that neither of us has a particular sense of having made a lot of decisions in life. There are people who talk about having chosen this and having crafted their lives, and there are people like me and the person I was with who have a sense of life happening to us. And that, for me, kind of highlights a way of seeing one's life from receiving mode and a way of seeing one's life from production mode. You could say active and passive. Of course, we all have this sense of agency. And so my question about agency and being feral, and it's to do with something that arose when we were moving, is I find when I'm moving that I can come to a point, or a point comes to me, where I've stopped being self-conscious and I've gone to another level or something, and I'm more present. And from that place, I can either pay much more attention to putting and placing and what I'm going to do next and how I'm moving, or I can find that the movement moves me and I'm not putting and placing, I'm being put and placed. And I've seen me being put and placed more exquisitely than anyone I know. So my question, those are about different kinds of agency. But in terms of being feral, I mean, one might think about a wild animal or ourselves become feral. Do you have a sense that both of those are still equally valid? Or when you say, I want my body to be in charge, or whatever you said, is that really just the passive one where we are moved, or is there still as much role for putting and placing an active?
There is still a role, but then it comes from a place of deep listening. If that, yeah, I guess. I mean, first, and when I work with people, I teach them more like, because we have we go in an environment, okay, I do this, we go into, which is automatic mode, but it's nearly like, okay, how do I just, what does this place need, what is the sound? So you're learning to receive because you're disconnected from that in other words, because the brain, so when I go to the marshes, I can do that in like 2 seconds because I'm so used to it. But I think when I bring new people, it takes longer for them to just like, there's so much information to just get. So there is a learning to receive. And then when you feel more confident with that, then you know then that you're not blocking that out, that it's not coming from, I guess it's because we're so used to like function in that way. We don't have, the receiving. But I guess from receiving, it can be a lot of stagnation. So how do you also keep that instinct going? And I guess that's the key. That's why I'm talking it is the hard, is trusting your instinct when it comes, and not be just. And I talk a lot about letting yourself be surprised as well, like really like, but it is nearly a practice of. And then the putting, when it comes,
Is the mind still engaged in that?
Yeah, the mind doesn't, I think there is more like at the beginning when you're so used to work from mind, you need to find a way to let it go back. And for me, having quite an academic background, it took ages to do that. And then when I could trust that the mind would not spoil everything, I say, okay, you can come back now. It's nearly like, okay, now it's fine. Now we can talk. And in a way, this book, because I wrote a PhD about 10 years ago, which is a different story, about a very different topic. But I was broken from writing from that process because it's so disembodied. And I really wanted, from that book, that I wanted it to come from body, from like, okay, how can I, from practice and from not so much mind. And I could still, the mind could come, but more at the, and it took me quite a while to write that book, not so much that I was always writing. There's a long period where I wanted a break and just be with what I'm doing, come back. Yeah, so I think it's more because our habit is that way. It's more like how to disrupt that habit, and then the mind can come back. It's more that. And it's at so big at a societal level that I feel that's. But also, you don't want to fall with every move and practice, you don't want to fall in the other problem that you're doing too much of that, too much of a receiving and passive, and you need to still find that way to be. And that can be with mindfulness, or like when too much awareness comes, it can also be like, shit, you can also feel frozen. Especially, when I first started meditation, it felt like it was nearly like, oh, too much awareness of all the things I'm doing wrong, fuck, and you felt like going down. So it's like, how do you keep awareness and that spontaneity and childlike? And it's easier for movement than just sitting for hours, for example. But I think it's more, finding a way to go back and forth, and then finding, and little practice. And this practice of nature is a beautiful teacher, but it can be practiced everywhere. In everything you do, basically. And I'm constantly learning and, seeing all the bad habits I have in my everyday life. And when I catch myself, oh, you're just rushing. And then I try to, how can I be present in my walking rather than I already want to be there, for example. Lots of little moments that try to catch me. Oh, that. Oh, I'm sitting. Oh, I'm not listening. Oh, I'm just. And then, oh, I'm eating. I'm not, or. I love eating with my hands. I find cutlery really difficult.
I can confirm that, because when I first read the manuscript, I was on a train to Denmark. I'm not brave enough to do the rolling around in the R's and so on. But I was doing the first 10 exercises or so in my seat, starting with moving without the head on top. And by the time I got to number 10, I knew we had to publish the book. So, I mean, they are exercises that work like that. Anyway, thank you. And I'm sure other people may have questions.
Or comments, or you an experience. I mean, this is just open to whatever it's, however it's relating to your own experience. I mean, this is a book also about sharing my own experience, to really invite others to find their own. I kind of want, it's not like, I don't want people to follow what I'm doing by the rules. In a way, I hope people will mix them up and just change them and adapt them to their own. That's important because that's part of the idea. But hopefully me trading the step before will give you an idea of how you can do that for yourself. Because each body has its own history and needs. Yeah.
Can I say something? Like, feeling very blessed to be guided in movement by you for the past many months, and the subtle consistency of exploring something through movement and then it not feeling like a big deal at all, and then that feeling like it has a profound rippling, shifting effect on how I see the world or myself within the world or within my life around me. And even just now, in that interaction, hearing you talking, then reflecting on something I was talking to someone about at the start, about not knowing who I am or what I'm doing, feeling like the most radically honest and authentic thing I can ever do, and how you were just speaking then, bringing a new layer of understanding to that, of like, well, yeah, if I'm constantly listening, if there's so much to hear I don't know, or not knowing, it's going to be a really like inevitable and natural state to feel it, and it might not last forever, it might last forever, but there's something of like, yeah, I just felt like that was a real mirror of like, even you talking about how you work with movement, or even being in this space and watching you embodying it, does the same thing. It brings that like subtle ripple shift of understanding to me in the world, or how the world lives in me.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think learning to trust the unknown more is quite important. And it's not, it doesn't sound as bad as, it is in a way trusting more yourself, because it's all there, but it doesn't necessarily have that mind clarity, but it's kind of like a deep knowing and letting, yeah. And I think we're not taught enough to trust that, yeah. Which is not to say there is not place for other things. It's more that it's been so constricted, this trust, this sort of thing, that it feels it's trying to give it a bit more space and recalibrating the balance.
Yeah, just to add to that, there's a difference between like knowing in your head and knowing like physical feelings. But what I like about this practice is tapping into the felt sense, where you just know, there are no words. And it just is. It's just harmony with the surroundings.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very much about trusting more that non-verbal quality. Non-verbal is not even the right one, because it's defining against the verbal, but there is already language. It's more bringing more consciousness that you're already communicating all the time in everything you do. Right now, in the position you're having, you're already communicating. And you bring more awareness to that, where you choose to sit, where you choose to be. And as you bring more awareness, and I do that as a teacher, and it's overwhelming because it's like so much information, but then it also is it's interesting because kinesthetically there's so much message that you can pick up from others and yourself. And the body doesn't lie. We might try to hide it, but it brings something from people that, yeah. And it's beautiful. I mean, I was watching you move earlier, and it gave me so much joy. There's nothing more than just seeing people allowing the body to be in every way they need to be, even if it's just doing nothing, do that or whatever. It's just, what I like is, and someone could do the same movement, but they don't really mean it. But when you mean it, you feel it. So it's not the movement, it's just knowing that person means it when they're doing it. And they really, and that, it brings me so much joy. It's like a pleasure. And I think there is a real, what I like to call kinesthetic ripple, and I really feel it. And I think working in a big group really helped, because the more the others allow themselves, the more it helps you to allow yourself. So the same way I say we've learned all this conditioning and things that block us, the same way we can unlearn them by being together and allowing each other to explore and move. Yeah, that's how I see it. And I really see that. And I'm sure some of you that moved in other contexts, you can really feel the ripple of moving with other body, whatever that is, and the energy. And so it's really about, yeah.
Could you speak a bit about, like, I'd be interested to hear about your experience of like the project of writing the book and coming up with all of it.
You mean the book itself?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of mentioned a bit how you contrasted it to like a PhD you wrote 10 years ago, and how that felt like very like mind-led. And I've wondered a bit about your experience, kind of writing this book, and how the content of the book and the practices and everything you just spoke about just then, how that leads to maybe a different, like what different experience of like writing quite a considerable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should even talk about the way I came to this type of movement, which is movement has always been a big part of my life, and I've explored lots of it, but there was about 10 years ago I really went deep and explored all sorts of practices. And I was lucky enough to, after searching with so many things, that someone sent me to see Sandra Reeve, who is an amazing movement teacher, but she trained with someone called Suprapto Suryodama, who was an Indonesian movement artist. And when I discovered that practice, it was just like a light bulb moment where I was just like, I was moving in a field. I mean, you were there, Andrew. In my head, it was just like, fuck, I can move anywhere I want, however I want. And my partner, I did for many years, I did all sorts of partner dancing, so I was always used to move in dialogue with another body. But suddenly it was just like, oh fuck, I couldn't move with anything. And actually for me it was, and I've always been a big improvising, so it was like I could feel everything. I was just dialogue. So immediately I started quite quickly wanting to practice that all the time, every day, and I started in Hackney Marshes. And then after a few years later, like, feral came quite quickly as part of my movement, something that needed to come out. Like, it's nearly like the word came out of my body when it came. It was just like, and I was surprised because I found, and then I don't know how it started. I think it started with, I really wanted to disrupt this idea of a human perspective, and I work a lot with plants. I have a really strong relationship with plants, and I have some of my hairbee friends here. But so for me, there was a real need it felt like I had strong connection with the environment, with plants, and it felt like there was so much coming from quite an academic background where I felt people were blocked from that. So I started playing around with some of those practices. I think I did even a COVID online course where I took, some of you were there. And then I just said to people, I've got some silly ideas. Do you want to be my guinea pigs? Just started getting there. And I said, it's great. And then I said to Andrew, I think I've got a book, Andrew. And he's like, great. And then it was just like, and then it took me a bit longer. And then I just played. And because the PhD was so much pressure, I just basically wrote, forget about it, and come back, or I'll move, or I'll play with moving outdoor, I'll write something. Every time I would go out, I'll come back. So some of the so there's 3 types. There's like just me talking a bit like my ideas and my journey, and then there's a practice. But there's also these entry diaries, which is when I go out in the marshes. So to give you an idea of what it might feel like to be out. And then I never intended to have them in the book. But then when I look back at them, I say, there's some great stuff in there. So it was a very organic process. And then it ended up being much bigger than I anticipated. As I start writing, then the first section came, which is all about disrupting the human and the body. And then the second section, which is more about being environment. and maybe more being with the outdoors. So, I mean, what you've tasted here, if you've never worked outdoors, it's another level of like, and each landscape brings something different, will make you move in a different way. I haven't had to, my job, I usually hardly do anything. I just choose a place, give a little score, and then people are gone. They're just like, whoa. Because it's just like being on, it's like being on magic mushroom without taking magic mushroom. It is just like, once you connect to that heightened awareness, you can feel, and then you give people a little door, and then they can enter themselves, and then you can take back to your own practice in any way you want. But it was quite organic, the process, and because I was moving constantly, I could reflect back. And when I was writing something, even I will be, okay, let's go and move, and then I'll go even in my bedroom and I'll do some movement. I was like, oh yeah, no, it's not right, and then I'll come back and write something. So I always try to dialogue between my movement and the writing. I don't know if that answer. Yeah.
I wanted to ask two things.
Ooh.
One is, have you had, would you say that you've had a spiritual peak moment with this research practice, or several? And can you speak to that journey of how maybe there's a spirituality in it, or not? And the second is, has your feralness ever got you in trouble in a non-feral environment? Because I imagine loads of feral practice may make you forget when to be feral and when to be.
I'll answer to the first one. Well, I guess it all depends what is spiritual and what is not. Maybe it's too big for, but maybe I'll do a short answer. But being able, I guess some of the experience that I had with nature and being outdoor, it is, yeah, you could say spiritual, but the same way that some people might take magic mushroom and have a spiritual experience, except that here it's not induced by something else, it's more myself just being really in that moment of awareness. And then suddenly, because it's that feeling of just, it's in a way feeling more whole yourself, but feeling in connection with everything else. And it's kind of like, what is hard is to stop it and have to go back to normal life. And I haven't quite found a way where I can bridge that. Although I think I'm trying to do that more in my life, because it's like, it's easy. I mean, obviously, but the reality of being feral, I can't sleep outdoor, I can't leave. I'm a human being, so I need a bed, a duvet, and all sorts of things. And even if I love sleeping outdoors in a hammock, but I can't do that all year round. So there is a sort of like, and that's why for me it's important to recognize how much can I be feral and how much, I need my mattress all the time. But yeah, there is definitely something of, and I think it's because of our disconnection from our everyday life. So when you experience that in nature, maybe that feels spiritual because we are disconnected most of the time. But and you could take it much further. But for the other question, not really, because I guess, you can push it. I have sometimes roll around on the curb in the street and people have been like, what's going on? But I've sort of talked a little bit about that when I talk more about how you could take this practice to other environments. And also explain something that we're doing here, like this. I say, do you imagine yourself doing that in the underground, waiting for your tube? I don't. And I've done pretty weird things, but it's just like, how far, where can you push it? And it's more, so what I say to people is more, I think it's good to push, but it's nearly like my way to see feral. I don't want to provoke because it's nearly too much. It's more like, how can I push it just enough a bit more that people don't feel freaked out, but they relax, okay? Maybe they themselves say, okay, maybe I could do something like that as well, or not. But so rather than do something too violent where they're just like, oh, she's too crazy, I want to go away. But if I do it in a way where I do it, but actually I haven't lost my mind, I'm more interested in people seeing that feral could be like a normal way of being. I mean, like my body wants to be that way. I'm not being impolite towards you. I'm just like, but there are situations where I guess I can sense kinesthetically that some people are not fully ready for that. So I don't push it necessarily because it's about also bringing them in. So, and it's the same when I work in a classroom. It's like finding out where some people can, it's easy for them, or they're more exploratory, and others, they need more time. You know, for some people, I might just do a mindful walk because that would be too much what we did today, you know. But it's more like I'm interested in how people can find, and I actually have a chapter that's called Finding Your Edge. It's nearly going to the edge, but not necessarily totally over that it's too much. And people's age are very different because of culture, society, whatever. So it's more like, what's my age? And it's the same with others. And this practice, I would say, is very much about, you can do anything, but it's like, as long as you take care of yourselves and the environment and others, so you're not just totally, you know, being destructive, I guess, in a sense that is not good for yourself, because you're self-harming or you're harming others. So there is that maybe more ethical point about it that help.
I have a question. So many years ago, you did a performance called Feral,
Yeah.
which I guess was where this idea started to come to fruition. And it felt like that performance was very much about healing. What would you say about using this practice in the context of healing?
It certainly can. And I think when you work with the body, it's inevitable. But I think the way I like to work with it is more like in an oblique way rather than directly. Like, I don't want to work as a therapist with this practice of healing, and it could be used for all sorts of things, but it's more I want to empower people that they have a better understanding with their body, and they find a way to, it's needed to help them to translate things that maybe they're not so aware of. Like, so you become your own translator, and then me being direct. I'm more saying, oh, you're not so, a lot of it can be just helping people, they're not aware of certain parts of their body. They're not aware. And it's just bringing awareness, but often this like awareness can relate to their own story, or who they are and what they've gone through in life. So, but I never go into the narrative of that. I kind of more help them to maybe point insights. And the beauty of this practice is working with the body and the environment. There might be a story of where you are and your healing journey, but you don't necessarily have to go in. And then it can be just quite empowering to just embody it in an environment with people that feel safe enough to witness you, that you cannot release something. But you could certainly use this practice more intentionally as healing for yourself, or someone that is a therapist and that say, oh, I'd love to, could use this practice and have with, you know, that support. But it doesn't need to be about healing directly, if that makes sense. But I think when you work with the body, I mean, I don't know if healing is the right word, but inevitably things that we haven't listened to, repress, are here. So whether you work with it or not, that's your choice. Yeah. I'm just aware of time, and I don't want to get people super exhausted. I don't have time, but I'd be happy to talk more to anyone who wants to talk more, but I also want to release you if you feel you need to like go back to your homes and relax.
Can we buy a book?
Huh?
Can we buy a book?
Yes.
Oh yeah, tell us, how do we buy
So there's a few, and Andrew can sell the book to you. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you.
There's that hard. You can buy their cash flow. When you get clean hands, that will you.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a good deal, I would say. Huh?
Will you sign it?
Yes, I'll sign it. Yes, of course, with pleasure.
Last question, maybe. What impact has this practice had on your long-term relationships?
You mean with people?
With people?
Wait, yeah. Well, it's somehow I can't take the non-human parts away because I see non-humans are also having a relationship with them. But it has, I guess it's just awareness of more of myself and others, and wanting to be more mindful about what I say, what I do, how others receive what I say and what I do, and generally wanting to choose environment and relationship that are nurturing to me and not the opposite. And I'm very lucky to say that I have wonderful friends.
Can I answer that question as someone who has a long-term relationship?
Oh yeah.
I feel like it might be nice from that other
Great,
perspective.
yes.
Is that because from my experience of relating with Claire, is like the non-human makes up her as a person, so the non-human is involved in our connection. So what she brings to me is also the non-human. And so in her listening and her witnessing of me, it's also the witnessing of the not-human. And so if there's something that I'm experiencing in my life and I might need silence or slowness or deep listening, then Claire brings that. But I don't separate the non-human and Claire. It's like it's all a big pool of being, and it's like Claire carries the energy of her work. And so when we're relating, it doesn't feel separate like Claire's work and Claire. It's like the energy in which she brings into living. And I'm lucky enough to enjoy that experience.
Yeah, and when I teach outdoor, for example, I feel like it's not me, it's me and the plants and the environment. I feel like it's nearly, I'm just like a mediator. But also, I guess, when you work with a non-human, it's just that subtlety of like listening and being, and then, so it's really like I can feel a lot. Like, it's nearly too, I mean, if anything, I'm quite sensitive, I mean, I've always been, but oversensitive, and it's nearly like, it's as much as I can take, and too much crowd, it can be overwhelming, because it's like I can feel so much, and so, which is great because I can really give a lot, but also it means that I have to be quite careful with my energy, and so I don't know if that in terms of relationship, and it definitely brings a lot in terms of a teaching, I would say, and creating and being really aware and tuned into all of the bodies. It's like a kinesthetic tuning to each body, each person, and then the more I work with someone, and the more I'm like, oh wow, their way of being with their body, it's like each person has his own way, and that's really deepened with my practice. Is more than non-verbal, for lack of a better words again, but that kind of, I can really tune in at that level with that person just by the way they hold themselves, and sort of like, because I'm constantly working with that in a way, and the more I move with bodies, and the more that's present, yeah, and the more I want to give that. But I remember I used to teach at SOAS, and I had, at the end of a year, I had a student that came to me and say, every time I came to the class, I mean, I feel really anxious every time I came to a class. I felt really peaceful. And for me, it was the best compliment that everyone's good. And I had quite a quite unusual style of teaching, and it's, I guess, not as aggressive and patriarchal centered, you could say. But it was really nice to receive that from that student, because there was something at the body level and in just the way I held myself, and I could feel that in a student. So it was not just about what it's saying. And I used to teach like audiovisual practice to social scientists, anthropologists. So I was trying to get them more in their bodies, and it was really nice to, to receive that. Because there's a university environment, which is very different, where it's hard to be creative and all of that. But she could feel it just coming into the room. So I think there is that kind of, that's the best way I can describe. For me, that's, a way I can sense I impact other bodies and other bodies impact me. It's also how other people impact. I'm more aware of that in terms of relationship and how to be mindful.
Can I also add, like, our human bodies, 50% bacteria and microbial bodies. So, like, in a profound way, we are all physically not as human as we have been led to believe. We are having interactions, embodied interactions with our bacteria all the time, and without them we wouldn't be able to digest our food. For example, this gorgeous meal that we've had, we wouldn't be able to do that with our bacterial partners. So it's because you were talking about the external boundary, like the external relationships, but there is something like an embodied relationship that we were having.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's much more like fluid where we are, and I think that's what I'm saying, like how can we just let that be a bit more fuzzy and not be so fixed about what that means to be us. And actually by not being so fixed, we can be more ourselves, the all of us, because actually it's much bigger than we think it is. So in that way, that also relates to your question, and you realize that you and me and not in a sense that I lose my identity, but there is a sense of feeling more connected to others as well, and wanting to honor that connection, not just,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You're welcome to have a bit more tea and take anything you want. I'm kind of exhausted and excited at the same time.